All right, so the previous lecture was what would happen if when the chromosomal sex equals the phenotypic sex. XX produces a vagina, XY produces a penis. But what happens when you have the chromosomal sexual stage not meeting the expectation you would expect with the phenotypic stage? So we talked about this previously. This is when you're talking about when we get an atypical phenotype. What happens when chromosomal says XX, but you get a penis? Or what happens when you have XY and you get both? So there are several factors that can go into having chromosomal sex not meeting the typical expectation for phenotypic sexual characteristics. So one of these is interactions between X and Y chromosomes. One of the things that can affect this, we talked about this when we had translocation in chromosomes, when we have reciprocal translocations. So you have an X chromosome and you have a Y chromosome. And remember, these can cut themselves out. And let's say this region here, you get a swap of the genetic material. This can affect development. And remember, this can happen because we have, you remember, crossing over. So during crossing over in males and females, you might end up getting crossing over genes that now what was previously on a Y is now on an X, and X is on a Y, and then that gets inherited by the offspring. A second way that you can have this, you can have mutations in cells that receive messages. So remember, hormones are the messenger system that tell cells how to act, how to develop. Well, you can produce all the hormone you want, send to those cells. If they don't have a legitimate receptor protein, remember you have to have that lock and key mechanism, that induced fit between the hormone and the receptor protein. So if there is a mutation in a protein that either causes it to be absent or different and not accept that hormone, it doesn't matter how many messages you send, they're not going to get the message. I liken it to if your Wi-Fi is down, I can send you 50 emails, but you're not going to receive one of them until your Wi-Fi is fixed. And then we can also have interactions between autosomal chromosomes and sex chromosomes. So not all the genes that are needed to have sexual development are on the sex chromosomes. There are also genes on the autosomes that will also affect sexual development. If these have changes or are not being produced, turned off, turned on, you can also then have sexual development maybe not be completed as expected. So even though you are XX or XY, something on the autosome may affect how those genes interact. So the book gives us a couple of instances or a couple of cases that we can think about and integrate our previous knowledge into. So one of these is called androgen insensitivity. Insensitivity. This is also known as case. So on this one, this is one of those places where we actually have the interactions of the X and the Y. So on the X chromosome, there is a gene for the androgen receptor. So this is called the AR gene. If this gets mutated, then an individual who is XY will actually be phenotype female. So let's think about why this is happening. If you are XY, then you are going to produce dihydrotestosterone. So a person who is XY is going to produce DHT, the dihydrotestosterone. Remember, it is the dihydrotestosterone that is going to tell you how those folds in the genital region are to develop. So in these individuals, because they are Y, they produce DHT. However, the cells in the genital region have no androgen receptor. So DHT is being produced. It's being sent to those cells. Since they can't hear those cells, the cells go to the default, which is the female precursor. And so now you're going to have the genital tubercle develop into a clitoris. You're going to have the genital fold develop into the labia minora. You're going to have the labioscrotum develop into the labia majora. So, XY chromosome, female phenotype. They're able to produce DHT just fine. It is a mutation in the cells that need to receive that message that don't get the message, so they go back to the default plan, which is the female phenotype. This came up in the Olympics a few years ago because a person who competed with other females was tested, and they did karyotypes, and they found out that that individual, because they looked phenotypically female and they were living female, they had no reason to suspect that they were XY, because when you have that particular condition, you look phenotypic, you develop breasts, you don't have facial hair, your fat distribution, body fat distribution is similar to other females. There's no reason to suspect that you are XY. So they always identified as female, they competed as a female, they were tested, the karyotype came back that they had an X and Y chromosome. Initially, the Olympics stripped them of their medals, but then later reinstated them. That's always a big question. It's like, where should that person compete? Should they be able to compete? There's another similar case before the Olympic Committee right now. So that's a case where chromosomally XY, phenotypically female, opposite what you would expect. You could also have what's called gonad intersexuality. This person ends up with both sexual phenotypes, and it's over the course of their lifetime that they change. So what happens is, in this case that they explain, an individual is XY. However, they don't produce enough testosterone. Remember, testosterone is going to be one of those hormonal signals that's going to initiate the development of these structures. Because they don't get enough of a testosterone, you have organ development that is incomplete. And because organ development is incomplete, this person will end up with a female phenotype. Because remember, this is the default plan. So at birth, this individual has all the characteristics of a female. So they didn't get enough testosterone. So even though hormones were sent, you didn't get complete development. So this individual still has the appearance of a clitoris, labia majora, labia minora. So female, phenotypically. However, we know things change as we hit puberty. Puberty, hormone levels change. Because this person is XY, now all of a sudden they get another shot, an adequate shot of testosterone. Now all of a sudden we finish development. Clitoris and labia majora finish completion and develop into a penis. The labia majora finishes completion into a testes. Testes may or may not distend depending on the development. In person's voice lowers, hair develops on facial areas and chest, just like a typical XY individual. And so this person has literally gone from being phenotypically female at birth to changing into someone who is phenotypically male at puberty.